It's so exciting to gather with you all this evening. Equip Connect 2024. A whole lot of learning is going to take place and discovery. We're really creating quite an amazing library. Thank you to Shawnee, who's the Church Vitality Associate with the Blue Ridge District. She's zooming in from Asheville. She's also the overall coordinator for this entire event. We're so blessed to have you with us this evening, Shawnee. Blessings to each and every one of you. You bring a unique spiritual gift set, a lot of wisdom and experience. Thank you again for sharing this time with us this evening. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's jump off. The next slide is an introductory slide. I think there it is. Let's go on to the next one. We're going to be looking at some basic stuff from the Book of Discipline, where it talks about the church council. First of all, I wanted to take a look at the overview for this evening. I'm going to take a look at a few basics from the Book of Discipline. There's going to be a brief introduction to a structure called One Board. Some of you may be participating in a one board structures, others may not. It may or may not be appropriate for your congregation. We're going to take a look at a sample meeting process to consider. I try to present what I consider to be some best practices. Of course, only you know through prayer with your congregation what are the best practices for your particular church. We're going to go a little bit deeper with the importance of a unique church vision. I'm going to suggest that you form a vision process team if you do not already have one. This would be in addition to your church council. Also, we're going to have an introduction to asset-based community development. We have a participant this evening that happens to know a lot about this. She's going to give us an up to a 3-minute introduction about that in a little while. Also, we're going to take a look at the importance of having a church covenant that enhances communication. Whenever we do that, we're going to invite you to actually share a suggested guideline that you would include in a covenant. Let's take a look at the next slide as we continue the overview. I'm going to suggest that whenever you do reporting during the church council, that you first begin with witness ministries, then outreach ministries, then nurture ministries. I'll talk more about that later. I've also put a slide in there called Money Follows Vision. That could lead to an interesting conversation. Then we're going to do some gem mining. That's going to be a lot of fun. That's when you will go into breakout groups and you're going to share with one another, hey, this is a gem that I think really helps a church council. And then we're going to have some time for discussion at the end. So I'm going to try to move this through reasonably quickly because it's going to be recorded. You're going to have the slides available to you. You can look at it later. So let's begin with prayer. Holy Triune God, shine through we, followers of Jesus who dare to lead, for we are vessels of transformation who embody holy imagination, inspired by means of agape and grace. We are doers of your word, who claim the lead role you give us in our communities. We will share ministry strategies, offering Christ, and the people said, amen. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we begin with a look at the Book of Discipline, paragraph 252.1. Of course, this is just basic information. Some of you may be brand new to the church council. The church council shall provide for planning and implementing a program of nurture, outreach, witness, and resources in the local church. It also provides for the administration of its organization and temporal life. It shall envision, plan, implement, and annually evaluate the mission and ministry of the church. The church council shall be amenable to and function as the administrative agency of the church conference. So let's take the next look. Next one, 252.3b. In order for the church, the council to give adequate consideration to the missional purpose of the local church, It is recommended that the first agenda item at each meeting be related to its ministries of nurture, outreach, and witness. The administrative and supportive responsibilities of the church will then be given attention. It is recommended that the church use a consensus discernment model of decision-making. On this last phrase, I encourage you to read more about discernment, read more about working toward consensus and clearness for decision-making. Parker Palmer is a good resource for that. The Friends Church, the Quakers tend to do this pretty well, but there's some really good information out there available on that. Tonight, we're not going to have time to get into it, though. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Paragraph 252.5, talking about the membership. The charge conference will determine the size of the church council. The membership of the church council may consist of as few as 11 persons or as many as the charge conference deems appropriate. So this is important. There's some freedom here with your structure. Of course, wanting to have the best structure in order to do the most vibrant ministry. So one possible option is to do ministry through one board. This is fewer persons who are actually on the council, and it depends on ministry teams. The small group doesn't try to do all the work, but delegates well. Here's a quote from a book called 10 Keys, 10 Prescriptions for a Healthy Church. This quote talks about a reason to consider the one board structure. And so this is something that these consultants, Bob Farr and Kay Cotan, who are United Methodists, realized by visiting several United Methodist churches. So this is what they wrote. Despite hosting zillions of hours of meetings, we have encountered few churches in our consultations that actually hold people or ministries accountable for results. Most of the time, we find that pastors have the responsibility for the church, but have been given little authority to enact the things they think could help the church be effective. Without a simplified structure and an accountable leadership model, in conjunction with strategic ministry planning, it is hard to see a bright future for reaching new generations of people. Again, this is after a whole lot of research. I highly recommend this book, 10 Prescriptions for a Healthy Church. It's exceptionally practical. So basically, what are they getting at? I think they're getting at, we need to beware of just having a church council that just sits around and talks about ministry and just keeps talking about the same ministries over and over and over again. The same people report, we hear the same information, we go home. So there is something that can be helpful called the one board structure. If you just feel like your structure has too many people on it, it's kind of hard to manage. Let's take a look at the next slide. So there are two helpful resources to help learn more about one board. I highly recommend this resource from the Delaware Conference. It lays out the one board structure in an exceptional way. It's remarkable how well done it is. I showed this to some of our church vitality associates, and they said it's the best they've ever seen. Also, I encourage you to look at the recording of the session led by Reverend Katie Lineberger. She's also going to have a session on one board. Okay, so let's move on to the next section. Okay, let's take a look at paragraph 252.5. Again, this is basic information, but here are the minimal number of persons that a church council can consist of. The membership shall include, but not be limited to, the following: the chairperson of the church council, the lay leader, the chairperson. So let's just take a look at a sample meeting process I'm going to suggest for consideration. that you may want to meet with your church vision team, process team, if you decide to form one, and just kind of take a look at process. Of course, we begin with prayer. Usually there is a devotion that is led, hopefully by one of the laity. What would it look like for your devotion not to be read out of the upper room? Instead, read a passage of scripture such as Luke 10:30 through 37. That's the parable of the Good Samaritan. And then for the devotion, what would it look like if the person who's in charge of the devotion that evening said, okay, what are some ways that we could shape our ministry strategies around this passage? For instance, it could lead to questions like, who in our community might be someone who's like the Good Samaritan, whom we tend to overlook and pass by? What may be a way of being church with that person and being the church with them in community where they are? What might that look like? Now, even though you only commit about 15 minutes perhaps to a discussion like that for brainstorming, you could really keep that in your minutes, and it could be helpful information for a church-wide retreat later that may help you get in touch with God's unique vision for you, for why you are the church where you are. Okay, so we could talk a lot more about that. It's pretty fascinating. You also could even do some Lectio Divina with a passage of scripture where you read the passage through 3 times. You said, pay attention to a phrase that really catches your attention. You do that 3 times. People simply repeat the phrase that caught their attention. Then you have some discussion around, I wonder why those phrases caught our attention so much. So notice we do some prayerful brainstorming right at the beginning. Okay, so now we know the mission, don't we? The mission is the Great Commission, Matthew 28:16 through 20. So now let's move on to the visioning. Okay, so let's do a chat poll now that Shani's going to facilitate. Do you know your church's vision? Simply put in the chat, yes or no. We're not going to take a lot of time with this, so just please put it down quickly. Do you know your church's vision? Yes or no? Okay, this is pretty interesting to see. We're getting a lot of yeses, so that's encouraging. That's looking good. Some no's, good. We got some honest people. That's good. It's okay if you don't know it. Okay, no, we're getting some no's coming in. So it's an interesting question. Do you know your church's vision? Is it a vision that you can just really, it's so much who you are, it's organic. You kind of know it by heart. I mean, you just know it. Okay, so why is it important to have a church vision? Because what's it look like to be a church who's trying to be everything to everybody? How does that work? What's it look like to be a part of a church where everybody just kind of goes off and does their own thing? What is a church vision? Well, a church vision usually is up to 12 words long, and it is a statement that's based upon your church's spiritual gift set, your hopes and your dreams, and also your sense of what's going on in your community, the persons with whom you minister in the community, in your parish. So really, a really well done vision will take into consideration not only your own spiritual gift set and your interests, it's prayerfully developed, but it also takes into consideration some asset-based community development. Let's take a look at the next slide. So a resource that I highly recommend is called Transformation Journey. If you want to learn more about Transformation Journey, please click that link. I'm familiar with many different vision processes. To me, this is the best one. Here's one reason. You do have to do some work at the front end, gathering important information, but it's not too overloaded with analysis. Before then, there's a gathering of the leaders, and then you hone in on some key areas in which you want to grow forward. And then you receive a transformation journey guide, someone who is really gifted in the particular area that you really want to go all out with. Let's say you choose 2 or 3 areas. You get to work with this journey guide for up to 6 months, each journey guide. I love this process. Again, it's hard to believe how good it is. So to learn more about that, just go to that link. Feel free to get in touch with me, Nancy Rankin. Um, I'm a facilitator of the transformation journey, also one of the guides. Probably several of you are our guides. They're lay guides, they're clergy guides. We're blessed with a plethora of giftedness in our conference. And Nancy Rankin has a gift to be able to get a sense of working with the district superintendents, who would really be some good guides to work with this church, who would be really good to be part of their transformation journey team. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Oh yeah, also for spiritual gifts inventory, go to plowpoint.org. There's a really good spiritual gifts inventory on plowpoint.org. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Indeed, vision really does matter. So let's just do a little poll thing right here. Which driver is usually the most helpful to have in the driver's seat? Now, I'm talking about with your church. Let's just say, let's just look at the church council. Which one of these 4 do you think would be the most helpful most of the time to have in the driver's seat? So if you put down either management, relationships, vision, or ministry strategies is the new word for what we used to call church programs. Let's just kind of sit back and take a look at this. Pretty interesting. Sean, if you might tell us a little bit later, kind of where the percentages came in at on this one. This is pretty interesting. Okay, right there, Shawnee gave us, she actually put them down each one, I think. Interesting. Take a moment and look at this. This is actually one of the exercises that the transformation journey team will do with your church leaders. And it is done in a really creative, humorous, and fun kind of way, where there's some reflection around this. Then there may be times in which one of these is really necessary to be in a driver's seat, but which one do you think is most helpful to have in a driver's seat most of the time? Why? It's a very interesting question.
So we have vision has a strong lead, but relationships is a close second.
Okay, interesting. Um, so many people believe, I'm going to try not to share my bias too much here. Many people believe that in most cases, it's helpful to have vision in the driver's seat because that helps us know why we're here. And then have relationships perhaps in the front seat next to the driver. Why? If we put relationships in the driver's seat, then we tend to just focus on one another and trying to keep one another happy. And that can be quite interesting. But if we really know why we're here and what our aim is, God, why are we uniquely here for this season of ministry now? What are our core values? Then we tend to know most how to focus our resources. The pastor has a better idea how to focus most of their time, for instance. Um, so ministry strategies follow vision. Ministry strategies follow vision. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Again, we could spend all night on that one, but we're not. Okay, I think this slide here is exceptionally important. Imagine what it would look like to perceive the church council as a vessel of the prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in hell, as it is in heaven, as it is in God's realm. Consider implementing a vision process team that includes the lay leader, pastor or pastors, and church council chairperson and staff relations committee chairperson. I would suggest you keep this team very small. The purpose, keep your unique liquid church vision before the church council. The vision is liquid because we minister in a day and time now in which we're needing to constantly get this sense of how is God leading us to, where is God leading us to focus the most. The church process team could help keep the council, keep them honing in on offering Christ as the reason why we're here. We're here to offer Christ. I would suggest that you would consider forming this vision process team. Take a look at your church meeting format. And why? Because there's so much to cover. And my experience teaches me after 37 years working full-time with many different local churches, different sizes, different places, that if we don't put some intentional time planning from this meeting ahead of time, what happens is we just tend to do what we always tend to do. We tend to report, and go home. It's kind of like when you're planning for worship. The best practice for worship is have a worship design team where there's a small team working together to envision worship months in advance so that we can really do worship well when we get there. Well, it's the same thing with the church council. So sometimes there can be last minute items that might come into play. So therefore, let's say you're meeting once a month. I highly advise you to have this church vision process team meet about 1 week prior to when the council meeting normally meets. That way, if there's any last minute agenda kind of item that needs to come in, you could add it. But I encourage you to shape the meeting around what matters most. We are here to offer Christ. So along those lines, I invite you to seriously consider having at least two church council retreats a year. Yes, I said a year. Now, the retreat might just take place for 2 hours on a Saturday, perhaps. Perhaps another retreat might take place at a retreat center. Could take place at someone's home or at the lake. Because it's important to come together because vision matters and relationships always matter. So we need time to pray together and play together. So the church vision process team would plan out these retreats, and you could figure out what means of grace that we want to participate in, such as centering prayer. What's some fun stuff we want to do together? What are some ways we can play together? And then let's be intentional about nurturing habits that help us walk toward clearness of God's vision for our church. In what ways is God equipping us and calling us to be mutual blessings with our community and parish? If I had to pick out a slide that I consider to be exceptionally important, it's this one right here. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so resources, asset-based community development. For a beautiful example of a church that has done asset-based community development remarkably well, I highly recommend the United Methodist Church for All People in Columbus, Ohio. I recommend you take a team there. It's that well done. You can learn more about it by clicking that link. And now I'd like to introduce Reverend Dr. Linda Silver-Coley. She's the Executive Director of the Orman Center at Duke Divinity School. I have a link there to the Orman Center. I'm sorry, Dr. Coley, I can only give you up to 3 minutes, but if you would just briefly tell us some about the Orman Center and your resources for asset-based community development.
I'm sorry, can I just add a technical thing real quick, Dr. Coley? I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but everyone won't be able to click on those links that are in the slides. We will email those out after the session is over. Okay, sorry about that.
So I'll just quickly say that if you go to the Women's Center and click on our link, and then you click on my bio, I have that article linked to my bio. Our approach for assets-based community development is to walk alongside communities, churches, to identify the barriers to thriving within your community, and then form teams with the community, with community leaders, and using the human ecology framework, which separates out all of the institutions that affect these barriers in the community. And then we've taken a university level 17-week course down to 6 weeks to teach a church to focus on what you think the barriers are in your community, get your team together, and how we're going to solve it. And by the end of 6 weeks and 3 days, we're presenting solutions to major problems within the community that the church has actually come up with the solution for. So that's about 3 minutes, I guess. But I would encourage you to take a look at our website and see some of the things that we've done and some of the amazing projects that churches within the Durham area and the Tidewater, Virginia area, we have 17 sites that have developed projects in that method. Also, if you're interested, we're going to launch one in Winston-Salem. We're going to launch a program in Winston-Salem the end of the week, end of the month. And the deadline for getting in interest is January 24th. So.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Coley. That is awesome. I highly recommend that y'all follow through with Dr. Coley. One thing about Hoover is we can really stay in touch and stay connected. If something's caught your attention and you want to learn more about, feel free to get in touch. Let's get in touch with one another talking about this. Again, this is amazingly important. So I'm sorry we couldn't give you more time.
Let me jump back in to say it's no cost to you. We're funded by the Duke Endowment and the Lilly Foundation. So this project is with the Lilly Foundation, and you will end up with the capability grant. If your project's good, we'll walk alongside you till implementation.
Whoa. Thank you so much. Thank you for all y'all being with us. That's some powerful stuff. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so let's take a few moments now and change gears. Why is a church covenant so important? A covenant contains guidelines for communication, facilitating the implementation of ministry strategies. After a conversation with many clergy and laity, also and based on my own experience, a church that does not have an agreed upon church covenant will be more likely to become mired in triangles that break down trust. You know, if we have a concern, for instance, and we're not quite sure the agreed upon way that we share concerns, I'm sure y'all may have experienced this from time to time, relationships. Rather than go to the person with whom I have the concern, I may go talk to somebody else about that person. And then perhaps the person I talk to might enter into the rescuer role and go confront the other person. And then it tends to break down communication, and it tends to lead to silos. So in other words, to do ministry well, it's important to have a church covenant. This is something that Plowpoint Ministries does very well, plowpoint.org. Beth and Kelly Chrisman have developed some great resources around this. But I highly encourage you to have a church covenant for your church and keep it before your church council. Keep it present in all your meetings. I think I've been in churches where not only have we had the church vision displayed, our core values, and some key ministry strategies, we've also had the church covenant displayed. And from time to time, I've walked with persons to that. We've kind of gone over the covenant together. It's just a good reminder. We're all people. I know Kelly Christman likes to say, hey, let us all take 100% responsibility for the 10% of ways we contribute toward dysfunction, because we're all forgiven sinners in need of grace. Let's have a church covenant, particularly around in what ways are we going to share hurt, concern, disagreement, anger. We can learn from those feelings. So right now, I'd like to ask you to do the chat again. Write down one guideline that you think would be important to include in a church covenant. One guideline. And again, this will be recorded. You can look at it later. This is more of an introduction. We're not going to go way in depth. Just wanted to take a moment here. What might be one guideline you'd want to include in a church covenant? Respect each other's opinion, yes. The purpose of the church, Christian hospitality, respect again, mutual respect. Honestly express your opinion, encourage people how we would do our mission. Be respectful again, show grace. Listen to hear, not to respond. Yes, we could send out some samples of church covenants. That's something we could do a follow-up. Sean, if you'll remind me of that, please. And also we could share with one another. If you have a church covenant, share it. One guideline I learned it from the staff pastor relations material that was done through Duke Divinity School. Let us share prayerfully examine thought. Another one is, let us use iMessages. I will go and speak directly with the person with whom I have a concern. Let love guide. So I encourage you to really reflect upon this. It can go a long way. So often a church will really work hard on a unique vision and core values, but not pay attention to this church covenant and keep getting sidetracked by extensive relational work. Listen to each other, yes. Again, I apologize we can't go more in depth with this because it's so important, but I do want to share another example of something related that goes along with this. Let's take a look at the next slide. There's some ways to learn to disagree well and learn from conflict. One of these I learned from, it's called EQ HR for church leaders, emotional intelligence for church leaders. It was founded by Roy Oswald, who works with the Auburn Institute. He used to work with the Auburn Institute. And then he founded EQHR. There's a little process that I think it'd be really fun to do. What would it look like to be part of a church council, and maybe during your church council retreat, when the church isn't really at a high level of conflict, you say, you know something, let's grow forward the way we do communication. It'd kind of be like, for those of you who are in close relationships with someone else, when you're not really hurt with one another, it's helpful to have a covenant, particularly around how you're going to learn from hurt and anger. And sometimes you can remind each other of the covenant. Remember what we said? We need to do the speaker listening technique now, for instance. I want to go through one process right now. It's called the EAG. Let's say a church council agreed that the next time somebody got really angry during the meeting and just got up and walked out, rather than get all embarrassed and kind of talk about that person, maybe not, at least pray for the person. What would happen if we actually learn from that? Because whenever we're really angry, we're really invested. It's important what we're talking about. What would happen if we actually learn from that emotion? So let's say that a group had decided they're going to do the EAG. What would happen is this: the church council chairperson might wait a few days and then call the person up and say, hey, how you doing? Would you like to do the EAG next time we have a church council meeting? That person might say, no way, I'm not ready for that. But I'll tell you, but I'll let you know when I am. And so let's say you check back again the next month, the person says, yeah, I'm ready for it. So what would happen is that person who got angry would start out saying, well, this was the experience of what happened. This is what happened when I got really angry. This is what happened when I got hurt. And then anyone else in the room who was there at that time would have a chance to go around and acknowledge that experience. Yes, I remember what happened. I remember the event. You don't have to talk if you don't want to when it goes around the circle. Then it comes back to the person again, and the person says, here's what I was feeling when that event occurred. I was feeling this. I felt hurt. I've been hurt by this before. And they gave a little bit of an explanation. Then it'd go on to the next person. Well, this is what I felt in the room. I felt anxiety, is what I felt. Another person, I felt sad. Another person, I felt mad. Another person, I wanted to run away. Okay, then you circle back around the room again, and the person who got mad the first time does some analysis. Well, I think this is what was going on with me then. I'm having a hard time now. I'm facing some sickness at home with my family. And I admit that I got a bit carried away at that meeting. I admit it. Somebody else might do some analysis. Well, I really felt unsettled then because it reminded me when this happened before and we blew up at one another and this happened and the church just fell apart. Then you go around the circle again. You don't have to talk unless you want to. Then it comes back to the person who was angry, and that person says, now here's what I want to learn from this. This is my goal. And this is how I think it would help the church. We got a lot of feelings about this one issue. We keep running around it. I think we need to learn how to agree to disagree and take a deeper look at this, because I think if we go deeper, we're going to end up coming up with something that's really going to help people a whole lot. And then each person just goes around the room and lists their goal. And what happened is we just really benefited from the hurt. We're learning how to agree to disagree well. And this could help us really get on the same path and find one ministry strategy that we're going to do really well. Sorry, I don't have more time for that right now. Just wanted to introduce it because it's important. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, if you want to learn more about that, there's that website, eqhr.org. Also, Beth Chrisman is leading a session on conflict with EC 2024. Also, I highly recommend that book, The Emotional Intelligence of Jesus, Relational Smarts for Religious Leaders by Roy Oswald and Arland Jacobson. My experience teaches me that often we don't pay attention to the emotions in the room. What would happen if we did? Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so now we get back to the discipline. I'm suggesting that when reporting occurs, if you're part of the church vision process team, that you talk to your church council about considering making reporting about witnessing ministries first. Because we're here to offer Christ. Ministry strategies are about offering Christ. So this describes the witness ministries of the church. I'm not going to read that right now. So it's right there. It can be read later on. Let's go to the next slide. Indeed, we are all, as followers of Jesus, relational evangelists. So we're about praying, building relationships, listening, 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 listening. There's an excellent book that's called Caring Evangelism that was written as a Stevens Ministry resource. That would be stevensministry.org to get that resource. Anytime we're in community, let us be praying. Let us be open to building relationships, particularly with persons that we tend not to build relationships with, particularly with persons who appear to be, quote, different than us. And let us listen, invite them to share their stories, who they are, and ask open-ended questions. Tell me more about why you think this. Get curious, like Bishop Carter said. And just keep remembering that Christ is in the middle of the relationship. He's there. Dear Jesus, help me see the person the way you see the person with whom I'm relating. Dear Jesus, help me love the person the same way you love the person with whom I'm relating. Jesus, I'm hoping you're helping that other person see me the way you see me. Jesus, I hope you help that other person love me the way you love me. Dear Jesus, particularly help me be open to going to places like coffee shops or places I like to go. Could be the YMCA, could be anywhere I like to go. Help me be open to forming relationships. And dear Jesus, once I listen enough, I think that person might actually ask me, you seem kind of different. Tell me more about yourself. It's amazing how well it works. It can work anywhere, any place, anytime. We are relational evangelists. That's why we're here. So I just wanted to throw that one in. I encourage you to really put a lot of energy in your church council on relational evangelism. In what ways does this ministry strategy offer Christ? If it's not offering Christ, in what ways can we invite the formation of listening and open the door to offer Christ? Let's go to the next one. There's some good stuff out there going with EC 2024 on evangelism. Okay, then I encourage you to take a look at outreach ministries next in your ordering. Notice there's a bunch of ministries here. We try to get reports on this every single meeting. We're going to be there all night long. Don't want that. So again, that's where this church vision process team planned it ahead. Lord, where do we need to go? What have we been hearing people say? What are we learning from people in the community, the parish outside of our own church building? Where do we need to go? Hey, I'm sorry, sister, brother, might have to wait till next time to get that report from you. Could you give us some form of a written report? Maybe just give us bullet points, what's happening. Can we just catch that up later, maybe? Okay, let's go to the next one. Remember, instead of trying to be everything to everybody and settle with doing some programs or ministry strategies kind of good, let's embody one ministry strategy uniquely well. This is something any size church can do. Then it gets to this next key question. What is your lead role in the community? Dan Pizzette has written a remarkable little book. It's not too long either. You talk about a fun book to read as a church council. Take a look at Dan Pizzette's book, Expanding the Expedition Through Community Connection. It takes a look at lead role. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, of course, we're familiar with Fresh Expressions. Luke Edwards is leading the event on this. I encourage you to take a look at recording. He's also written a fantastic book, hot off the press. That's the title of it. Basically, a fresh expression builds on the common interests that you may have as an individual, as a team of people, or maybe there might be a whole bunch of people who had this common interest within the church. That could be a clue. Hey, we might want to form a fresh expression off of that. Let's go to the next slide. I'm trying to save as much time as possible for discussion at the end to learn from y'all's gems. Now, nurturing ministries are exceptionally important. Worship, for instance. Why did I suggest that we take a look at this last in the church council? The reason is research shows that the last entry point into a congregation today is the worship service. Yes, we want to do the worship service exceptionally well. Yes, we want to have a worship design team that's planning services in advance. But to be honest about it, the people who are going to come to worship today, for the most part, have already got to know some of our church members some other way, maybe through a common interest, maybe through ministry outreach. We want to invite people to worship and do worship exceptionally well. But no longer does ministry look like build it and they'll come. Put on the best show and they'll come. We are the church in the community. In what ways can we get out and be in the community and be the church in community with community? And yes, that way we kind of plant what I call a Hansel and Gretel trail. We leave word of life breadcrumbs on the trail back to the worship service. For instance, if you want to have a ministry in which you're inviting people to come for a meal, the best thing to do might be to have a vacation Bible school in that particular community. Get to know the people there, get to know all the adults. And then if you want to reach that community, you might invite them back to something like a Wednesday night fellowship, and you may have a meal and have some worship with that. It was getting out there first that got it going on. That's why I put witnessing first, outreach, then the nurturing ministries. Making disciples is important. Be intentional. What are the intentional ways that y'all make disciples? How do you apprentice disciples? How do you mentor disciples? The trades do it well. Stanley Hauerwas used to talk about this all the time. He grew up in a family. His father was a bricklayer. Stanley apprenticed to his father as a bricklayer. In what ways are you apprenticing others to become followers of Jesus? Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, now this one could be fun. This is going to take some time, just a little bit of time right here. Okay. So let's have a chat discussion. What does placement of the treasurer's report early in the church council meeting suggest? Let's say you put that right after the prayer. The money drives everything. So money's in the driver's seat. The budget. Can we afford that? Financial troubles. Finances are the most important. What we got in the past, what we're going to get in the future, we might even get a whole lot less of it. Managing expectations. It definitely prioritizes the budget over everything else, including visioning and dreaming God what might be possible. Does it suggest a theology of abundance or scarcity to throw the budget right up there at the first, right after the prayer? Does that suggest a theology of abundance or scarcity? So the next question is, what are the implications of developing vision-based giving and investing goals? Now, those are the kind of questions I encourage y'all to have. Have those questions as a church council. What would it look like to have that question as the only thing you talked about at a church council one night? Y'all got the wisdom. Y'all got spiritual gifts. You got the experiences. You're prayerful people. Why not ask questions like that? And you come up with the answers. And think about how you even do reporting about giving as well. It's kind of like saying, what would it look like to do Acts 2:42 through 47 ministry? Dare we even ask questions like that? Church council, it's your job to invite imagination, kingdom of God imagination. For Jesus is risen from the dead. God is sovereign. God is in charge. God has more than enough resources to bless all. Church council, in what ways can we shape our visioning and the way we do ministry around that good news? Okay, a helpful resource is very practical that gets into some of this. It's called The Coming Revolution in Church Economics by Mark Demas. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, remember, this kind of reminder, accountability matters. Accountability matters, and accountability matters. So here might be some questions that I encourage the church vision process team to ask and the whole church council. It could be another whole meeting. As a church council, in what ways will we hold ourselves accountable? I'm not going to answer the rest of that. Y'all will know the ways God wants you to hold each other accountable as a church council, as leaders, as spiritual leaders. Okay, so there's a couple for instances. In what ways do we measure faithful practices that nurture implementation of a ministry strategy that offers Christ uniquely well? Do all your ministry strategies still offer Christ? Maybe they used to offer Christ many, many years ago, but are they offering Jesus any longer? Is anybody coming to Jesus through those ministry strategies? If not, why do you have them? I mean, you know what you do really good. Are you looking to build relationships and offer Christ? You know, in your community, God has already blessed and equipped people with the blessings that's going to bring your church alive. It's like when I was in Greensboro in ministry, God sent us missionaries from other countries. They were called refugees. Some were from Zimbabwe, some were from South Sudan. They woke us up. They taught us how to worship. They taught us how to pray. The people were in the community, sisters and brothers, with the spiritual gifts. They are like that parable of the Good Samaritan, the person who got left by the side of the road. Who are people that we're not seeing out there? I mentioned earlier the United Methodist Church for All People in Columbus, Ohio. Okay, so they were right there on the street between the haves and the have-nots in Columbus, Ohio. They started out with a simple clothing ministry. And then they said, you know something, y'all, we're going to follow these people home. And they followed the people home. And they got to know them. They listened to them. They said, what are your hopes and your dreams? What are your challenges? What's your next best step? And what are you willing to take responsibility for? We will walk with you. And they became, they're the teachers. They're the ones that know what's best. And it's amazing all the connections and resources that occurred when we just started realizing, you mean, God, you're over all this? You're over this whole city? And all of a sudden, these people started coming together, relating with each other as mutual blessings. Okay, next, I kind of got wired up on that one. So let's go to the next one. In what ways, no, not the next one, let's back up to, let's go back up one and let me get that second question. There we go. In what ways have we agreed to grow forward intentional strategies that will help us be mutual blessings in relationship with our parish and or community? Big question, big question. Focus on the big question. Focus on the big question. Stay on the big question. Stay on the big question. You will not get it to in a hurry. It's not about a quick fix answer. It's about adaptive change. Am I willing to be an instrument of God? Am I willing to let my identity be shaped by Jesus? We as a church council are inviting people to get on the potter's wheel with us and say, Jesus, have your way with us. We are yours. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so another good resource to spark Kingdom of God imagination It's the book, A Future That's Bigger Than the Past Towards the Renewal of the Church by Samuel Wells. Exceptionally well written, good stuff, easy to read. It makes you think and pray a lot. Hey, this would be something good to really read as a church prior to a church council retreat. With prayerful investment, it may spark a church council's imagination and be a great tool in preparation for a retreat. It also includes helpful suggestions on ways to measure fruitfulness. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, now we're here. That's the reason why I was hurrying up so much. So we're going to quit hearing me talk so much. I think I tried to start preaching a couple of times, but anyway. So y'all got the gems. Shawnee's going to help you all get into breakout groups. And I want to ask you, with your breakout group, please get a recorder or reporter who will write down the gems being offered in the room. If you'll please write them down or type them down, because then you're going to put them in a group chat. You're going to put a summary in there of the gems you talked about. So what's a gem? The gem would be, this is what I really believe is essential to have a fruitful counsel and ministries. This is what I really think. This is the gem I really lift up. There's a bunch of them, but I'm really going to lift up this diamond or this emerald or this ruby. And then if you'll get a reporter early on, please get a reporter early on. Ask right away. If one of y'all just volunteer right away, hey, I'll write all it down and I'll put it in the chat. Please do that, because this is going to be then shared with everyone. Let me shut up. Y'all got, let's take 18 minutes with this, and it'll give us some time to get back with each other before we conclude. So Shiny's going to start putting y'all in breakout groups, and y'all would just kind of start going into those.
We have about 1 minute per group, if you can share.
Where's breakout room 6?
Right here.
Give the report, Miss Girl.
Okay, so one of the things we talked about were active listening, kind of the basic things that we all know are important. But one thing that we did last year is a church-wide retreat to try to bridge the gap between our 9 a.m. We have a 9 a.m. contemporary service and 11 a.m. traditional service. And in a lot of ways, we operate as two different congregations. So having this retreat where we brought everyone together to share ideas and sit at tables and kind of brainstorm on what's important to them and making sure everybody had a chance to feel heard really shifted the dynamics of not just our council and our committees, but our congregation as a whole. And some people, had gone to church there for 8 years and had never seen people that went to the other service because, they just hadn't had the opportunity. So we also talked a little bit about engaging families and younger members of the church and the power that can be behind that to help open up more difficult conversations, perhaps with older family members that might be more resistant to change, so that if we can empower our 20-something and 30-something-year-old members to talk with their parents or their grandparents that might be dragging their feet about some of the things that are happening in, the United Methodist Church, but also our individual congregations, that can help keep things moving in a positive and productive way.
Another group, please report.
From group 2, from room 2, we talked about the communication, that you had to have open and effective communication with good negotiation skills and good conflict resolution.
So
Yeah.
we talked about much of the same in breakout 7 to have some ground rules and guidelines for discussion to help people maintain focus, to understand, remind people that we were going for the common goal. What did we all have in common? What are we trying to achieve? And to agree to disagree, but support the decision that the group makes. Even if we disagree with the decision, you got to support it and bring a lot of love and patience to the conversations as you do all those things.
Yeah. And group 8, we talked about giving people what they need so that they can have full input. If we're having a meeting, then let them know in advance what has to be discussed, what has to be decided, so that once they don't come and have to function cold. They already have given it some thought, and you'll get the best input that way. We were asked to discuss a situation maybe in our church where we had to work through a process, and we talked about a capital campaign that our church had to suddenly launch last summer because the boiler died, and how we put that whole campaign together, what we did, how we involved everybody in the church, how we built a strategy that involved everybody in church, and showed even those with the least amount of ability to input where they could do that, and how successful it was that we reached our goal a month early. But it involved a lot of information given out very often, keeping people very much involved in the process, and allowing and continuing to remind ourselves that it's our faith that's going to get us through this. And as I told the lady who was in the chat with me, it just seems to have resulted now kind of sort of that we're just a little bit more in love with whatever it is we're supposed to do. We are enjoying each other more. It's almost like we're trusting each other more. We're trusting God more, and it's just kind of a revitalization in a lot of ways. You wouldn't think that would come from having to face a problem like that, but that's what happened. A deep trust level arose from it. So that was group 8.
Next group.
We were group 1, I think. I put ours in the chat, the things that we talked about.
Well, thank you.
So I think the things that we ended with was stopping to celebrate the good things and always setting our sights on the next thing, but making sure that we celebrate what we're doing well, and that we take time to make sure everybody's okay. How is it with your soul every time that we meet, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a good question.
Well, in group 3, we spoke more about effective communication and visioning, how important we felt those were for our church council meetings and the propelling our church forward. And those are really the 2 primary focuses of effective communication and visioning.
Excellent. Any other?
The only one we haven't heard from is group 3.
That was group 3.
So that was you. Okay, group 4. That's the only one we haven't heard from. All right, but Bart, unfortunately, I think we got to move on.
I think Pat's muted. Pat was saying something. Pat, are you muted?
I guess I was. We're group 5. We haven't reported.
Okay.
Okay. We discussed some of the gems that you brought out tonight, Bart. We have a new church council chair that will begin tomorrow night, and she as she's got her own way that she's going to set this up with red dots, green dots, yellow dots as to how effective their programs are going, to see if they're all in agreement as they begin tomorrow night, whether as they go forward. So I told her she would be on our prayer list. I also shared that our church council just finished the transformation journey. And so we're now going forward with that. And we've divided up into groups as to how we'll be going forward with that. It's been exciting, it's been tiring, but it's also brought us all together. We also, we liked your EIAG idea also, because I had not heard of that before. And also I mentioned that our church council has visioning 1 month and then reporting the next month. We have visioning 1 month, and then we have reporting 1 month, but on the reporting end of it, we always have already sent all those minutes in. So we go on to the website and read all that before we go into that 1 hour meeting so that it doesn't drag on too long.
That's a powerful suggestion. It's 9:00 p.m. Again, we can somehow figure out a way to continue. Shawnee, tell us more about that. So we'll need to bring it to a closure. Y'all are blessing. The last slide in this presentation actually has a link that you can get the slides and all that. Shawnee will get them out there. Y'all, thank you so much for hanging in here so late at night and for all your contributions. Let's figure out a way to learn more from each other and have more dialogue. Any closing words, Shawnee? I think you're muted, Shawnee. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all so much.
Thank you all so much. And we'll get all that information out to you along with the slides.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all too.
Thank
Have
you.
a great
Keep
night.
going.
Good night.